scripture citation in the song like that. That is really cool. Yay, all right. Nice to have you here. Let's stand now and join in our call to worship and opening prayer, and then we'll do some more welcome and announcements. Momentous mountaintop experiences form a common thread in today's readings.
As we prepare to enter this coming week, we are reminded of the mountaintop experiences in our own lives, times when God meets us in a special and memorable way.
In the journeys we make, in the ways in which we serve, we have encounters with the living God. Amen. And let us continue with the opening prayer found in your bulletin. Let us pray together. God of light and transformation, we remember the journeys of Moses and Jesus and study them in order to learn more about ways we can experience your presence. We give you thanks and praise for the ways you work in our lives to illuminate so that the world might be transformed by your light and love. Create in us a strong desire to be useful to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. And please be seated. So today it is fantastic to have members of our Boy Scout troop and Cub Scout pack here with us. We're so honored by your presence. This is Scout Sunday, and you've come on a wonderful Sunday because you'll get to hear about our team that went to Nicaragua. And we just welcome you and thank you for taking time out of your schedule and your weekend to come and be with us before you watch the Super Bowl later today, right? Yay. So thank you very much. I wonder if all the scouts and leaders and parents could just stand so we can affirm you. Stay after the service for our refreshments in the lower church parlor, and we'll get a chance to greet you. And it is good that as a church we are a sponsoring organization for the Scouts. So that's an important role that all of you who are church members play also in supporting the work that the Scouts do in leadership development, character development, and service. So that's great. So in your bulletin you have, of course, the announcements. And for those who are new here, you'll see kind of some of the things that we do as a church. This week, of course, we have our famous Shrove Tuesday pancake supper. David Barney and his family are the ones who organized that. So, Scouts, you might like to come too. And maybe you already do. And this will be my first pancake supper with you. So, I don't know if you have a contest so you can eat the most pancakes, but I can eat a lot of pancakes. They're very good. And we are planning to have another contest. It's a surprise. So if you come, you'll get to see that contest unfold. So the Barney family would like you to call the office and just say if you're coming at the earlier or later part of the dinner, so they kind of get an idea of seatings. So please call to reserve your spot. Then on Wednesday, of course, we begin the season of Lent. And this is how the tradition has unfolded. On Shrove Tuesday, you have the celebratory night before we go into a more solemn season, a season of really examining our lives before God and perhaps making some sacrifices and changes in our lives. So we begin that time on Ash Wednesday. Hello there. Anyway, so that's Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. here in the sanctuary. We will have ashes and a service, and the choir will be singing. We're very glad to have the choir with us for the Ash Wednesday service. So please take a look in your program. You'll see other opportunities. One that I want to highlight is the We Walk Together service, a multi-faith service for victims of violent extremism. We are one of the sponsors along with other congregations, and many of you know Cliff Wolf. He's highly involved in getting this whole thing started. And it really started out of his awareness of Christians who were being persecuted, and then as the dialogue unfolded, there was a sense among all the different congregations leaders that we ought to broaden it, and all victims of violent extremism will be mourned and we'll come together as a community because we would like to show our solidarity in this community, that people of different faiths can walk together. And so we invite you to that. The information is in the program, and there are flyers on the bulletin board if you want to learn a little more about it. And I just want to say again, what a wonderful Bolivia luncheon we had last week. Thank you again to Ariana, to the outreach committee, to Cassandra for her great support of her daughter, and of course to Joseph Awoodsey, who came and preached and spoke at the luncheon about the Bolivia trip. It is Youth Ambassadors in Mission through our annual conference of churches in Connecticut and New York. And every year they go somewhere. They've been to Cambodia and a lot of other places to do mission work. And so we're very pleased that one of our teens is going, Ariana. And we met our fundraising goal and more, so that was great. We were able to fund the trip. Bruce, our lay leader, wanted to make one more announcement, and I meant to call on him earlier, so I apologize. And I'd like to give him a chance to tell everyone in the congregation about another mission and ministry opportunity.
Each year, our district offers a lay servant school and to teach various courses. One of the basic one is about how you can connect with God by serving your community and others. And that basic course is going to be taught right here at Mamaroneck by Pastor Karen on 2 successive Saturdays. It's March 12th and April 2nd. And it's from 9 to 4 on those 2 Saturdays, but we provide a lunch. And there is a small fee for that. It's $35, including the textbook and the lunch. And then there are some advanced courses that will be offered later on, April 23rd and May 7th. But in those cases, you needed to have completed the basics. So anyway, if anyone is interested in partaking in that, please see either myself or Pastor Karen, and it's a great opportunity. You don't have to travel too far.
That's right. We made it easy.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, you all, thank you for coming up, and thank you for singing with the band, and it's good to have Cub Scouts here today. How wonderful. I have here a copy of the Scout Oath, and I just wanted to read it to you and see what you think. On my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God and my country, and to obey the Scout law, to help other people at all times, to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. That's the Scout Oath. And the Scout law is a Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. So I wanted to ask you about that. I heard you asking about one of the words. Which one was it? Was that you? Courteous. What's courteous? Can anybody help me with what courteous is? Kind, respectful, and not being rude. That's a good definition. Polite is a good synonym. To be courteous, you know, some things you do to be courteous to others, you might open the door for them. You might say the P word. What's that? Please. And what's the T word? Thank you, right? That's courteous, to say please and thank you, right? So being polite and kind to others, good. So when you hear those, does that remind you of anything that we teach in the church? Does it sound a lot like what we teach? Yeah, it kind of does, doesn't it? So that's what's really good about sponsoring the Scouts, is that they're teaching people things that we do. Now, help people at all times in particular reminds us of the church. So what do the Cub Scouts do to help people? Do you do some things to help people, guys? With your pack? Or do you ever do like some things together to help other people? What are some things? Can you think of some? I'm sorry, to where? To the poor, good. Okay, what, like clothing or food? Excellent, excellent. So that's one way you help others. Very good. What are some ways that we help others through the church that you can think of? Do you think having a worship service helps others? See, it's not always giving things. You can teach them to love people and not be mean, Vicki said. Yeah. So in church, in Sunday school, and in the service, we're teaching people about God's ways, and that's a gift too, isn't it? It's not something you hold in your hand, and it's not like clothing or food, but you're feeding the soul, and you're helping people to live in a way that's pleasing to God, and it's more joyful, isn't it? There was a great line in one of the songs about the neighbors. Do you remember what it was? What was that song? You sang something about when you're with your neighbor, when you see your neighbor coming? What was it? When I see my neighbor coming, was that it? I'm going to let it shine. So all the people around us are our neighbors, and we do want to be helpful. So we're grateful for the Scouts teaching the values that we believe in as well, about helping others, just like Jesus helped many, many people.
First a reading from Exodus 34, 29 to 35. Moses came down from Mount Sinai. As he came down from the mountain with 2 tablets of the covenant in his hand, Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone because he had been talking with God. When Aaron and all the Israelites saw Moses, the skin of his face was shining, and they were afraid to come near him. But Moses called to them, and Aaron and all the leaders of the congregation returned to him, and Moses spoke with them. Afterwards, all the Israelites came near, and he gave them in commandment all that the Lord had spoken with him on Mount Sinai. When Moses had finished speaking with them, he put a veil on his face. But whenever Moses went before the Lord to speak with him, he would take the veil off until he came out. And when he came out and told the Israelites what he had been commanded, the Israelites would see the face of Moses, that the skin of his face was shining, and Moses would put the veil on his face again until he went to speak with him. Luke 9, 28 to 43. Now about 8 days after these sayings, Jesus took with him Peter and John and James and went up to the mountain to pray. And while he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly, they saw 2 men, Moses and Elijah, talking to him. They appeared in the glory and were speaking of his departure, which was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Now Peter and his companions were weighed down with sleep, but since they had stayed awake, they saw his glory, and the 2 men who stood with him. Just as they were leaving him, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." Not knowing what he said while he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them. And they were terrified as they entered the cloud. Then from the cloud came the voice that said, "This is my son, my chosen. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone, and they kept silent, and in those days told no one of any of the things they had seen. On the next day, when they had come down from the mountain, a great crowd met him. Just then, a man from the crowd shouted, "Teacher, I beg you to look at my son. He is my only child." Suddenly, a spirit seizes him, and all at once he shrieks. It throws him into convulsions until he foams at the mouth. It mauls him and will scarcely leave him. I begged your disciples to cast it out, but they could not. Jesus answered, "You faithless and perverse generation, How much longer must I be with you and bear with you? Bring your son here." While he was coming, the demon dashed out to the ground in convulsions. But Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit, healed the boy, and gave him back to his father. And all were astounded at the greatness of God, the word of the Lord.
And today we have the privilege of hearing from our Nicaragua team, and they always tell me that they come away different too from their time apart, their time serving in Nicaragua, and that the glory of God is upon them as they do that. So I'm going to invite the team now to share with you about their work and how God worked through them this year in Nicaragua. Thank you. Carol, why don't you come up, and Carol will introduce the speakers from the team.
And I'm going to introduce some of the team so that they can tell you about their experiences and changes that we saw in Nicaragua. Very positive events. We did a lot of really good work, and each person will tell you a little bit more about what we've done. So the first person I'd like to talk is Dr. Morelli. Dr. Morelli has been going to Nicaragua almost every single year that we've had the Nicaraguan trip, and he has been working with one of his colleagues, Dr. Siegel, and their stories are extraordinary. The conditions that they work in Nicaragua are very different than what we have here in the United States, and they are delivering really, really wonderful care while they are there. So.
Good morning. Yeah, 11 years, it's amazing, it's gone by so fast. I don't want to be up here without thanking the Kidder family, who have always supported us financially, and without your donations, we wouldn't be as successful, and thank you. And there are others who have donated and who have given so much. My wife, who's been home for 12 years, 11 years, and every time we go away, it always snows, and Michaela is home, and they're always shoveling. Michaela says, "Dad, if you're gonna go to Nicaragua, you must buy a snowblower, because I'm not doing this anymore." I also want to say that the group has gotten smaller, and because we have a lot of youth here, in the past, John's son, Evan, I had him in the operating room, and I go, "Come on, get closer, why don't you scrub? Put some gloves on." He goes, "Okay." Before he knew it, I had the knife in his hand, and I train residents, so it doesn't sound that weird to do this. And I had him make the first skin incision, or at least try to at least. But any of the youth who are here, so next year, if you want to have an experience of being in a hospital, seeing surgeries, being with patients, doing triage, doing all the stuff you see on TV, and then some, I invite you to come with us next year and just be annoying to your parents every now and then, saying, "Mom, I want to do this." And I think we're going next year in February. I'm not sure the exact date, but it's a great experience. We see a lot of pathology. I'm not going to stand up here and just say all the things that we do, but whatever you can think of as a pathological problem, we see. The list is so long. Limb length discrepancies, traumas, fractures, people who get their legs caught in corn harvesting machines, and it's a lot of stuff. And without the generosity of our donors, we bring down with us a lot of equipment, screws, bone graft. We carry everything. And we do a lot of good work, and I can't see myself. I always say I'm not going anymore because it's getting it's a long time, but every time I go down there, I just realize I'm going to go back again. And thank you, David, thank you, Jose, for your support. And please, next year, if you haven't come, I think the first year, I see the Hobbs are here, and Alan Borst was there the first year. I think we almost killed Henry on that trip, but he came out nicely. So it's a lot of history, it's a lot of camaraderie. It's a great day at the beach on Sunday. That's our day, or Wednesday, depends on when you go. And it's a good time. So thank you very much, and hopefully we'll see some of you next year. Thank you.
As many of you know, we work with an organization in Nicaragua called El Ayudante, and they connect us with the communities that we then work in. We have a new community whose name I have an incredibly hard time pronouncing, Mamaroneck. It's something like that, but both Kathy and Kathy's probably the best person to pronounce it correctly. She'll be up in a little bit, but I'd like to have Paul Gardapi, who was able to come with us this year with his 3 triplets, well, his 3 children are triplets, and he had a wonderful experience, again, working in this new community. And he's going to talk with us a little bit more about what that community is like and how it's both the same as Carlos Fonseca, our older community, and different.
As many of you here know, for the last dozen years or so, we've been working in a community called Carlos Fonseca. Carlos Fonseca is located near a city called Leon in the northwest part of Nicaragua. And as Carol just mentioned, there's a mission there that we stay at and work with called El Ayudante. Carlos Fonseca itself is a neighborhood that's located off of a main road. It's an area of thickly clustered huts and shacks and cinder block homes. There's not a lot of open space. The people are very poor. Nicaragua itself is the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. Carlos Fonseca is served by a series of deeply rutted dirt roads, but there are little stores, sort of mini bodegas, at which the people can buy soda, candy, and other provisions. There's a great deal of dust in Carlos Fonseca because the roads are dirt and the temperatures are always over 90 degrees when we're there, so it's hot and dusty in January and February. In Carlos Fonseca, there are water taps at the end of most streets, and the dwellings have electricity. In the early years, most of the hookups were illegal, and you could see barbed wire going into the homes, and that's how the electricity was transferred. Over the last couple of years, we've noticed that the city has put up poles, and there are now meters for the electricity. How the people are paying for the electricity, or whether they're paying for the electricity, I don't know. For the last couple of years, the people at El Ayudante have been telling us about another community in the area that they wanted us to consider working with, and they described it as a community more needy than Carlos Fonseca. And it is a difficult name to pronounce. The way I understood it, it was Marianal, and so I'm going to refer to it as Marianal. Some of the other church groups that work with El Ayudante have been working in this other community, and the people at El Ayudante believe that Carlos Fonseca had seen significant improvement over the years, and that it made sense for us to begin working with this new community, Marianal. Marianal is located some distance away from El Ayudante, I guess about a half-hour drive or so, but it's still in the area of Leon. It's an area of peanut fields. As I understand it, the land was formerly owned by one family, and descendants or relatives of that family have been allowed to purchase plots of land on which they have built the same sorts of shacks that you see in Carlos Fonseca. And these are made out of tree limbs that have been pounded into the ground, and then corrugated steel is nailed to the branches, and that's what the homes are made out of. Marianal is much more isolated than Carlos Fonseca. As I indicated, it's an area largely of peanut fields, and we saw those fields, drove by them, drove over them. Peanuts grow underground, as many of you probably realize. When we were there in January, machinery had recently gone through the fields and pulled out the vines, and the peanuts were drying in the sun, and you could go out in the fields and try the raw peanuts, and we did. But the point is that Marianal is an isolated community. It's quite a distance from any main road, and there was no road that went directly to the area that we were building in. When the road ended, we drove along the sides of peanut fields, and then at one point over a field in order to get to the work site. The first time that we drove out to Marianal, we were greeted by a flock of turkeys. which was quite a surprise. I had no idea that there were turkeys in Nicaragua. But the first time we went to the site, a flock of turkeys ran over, led by a good-sized white turkey, who didn't seem particularly happy that we had showed up. There were also plenty of chickens and roosters roaming about. In contrast to Carlos Fonseca, Marianao is largely open space. The shacks and building sites are quite spread out. There are lots of huge trees, mango trees, tamarind trees, so there's quite a bit of shade. There's a lime tree. There was a lime tree going right next to the shack of the family for whom we were building the cinder block house that we were there to do. There are water taps in Maranao, as in Carlos Fonseca, and there is electricity, although it wasn't clear to me where exactly it was coming from. There was a family of ducks that lived next to the work site, which seemed odd. They seemed to think that the streams created by the dishwater were some sort of river that they could swim around in. Lots of the mangiest dogs you can imagine. It's not easy to be a dog in Nicaragua. There are no stores of any sort in Maranao, and it's quite a walk to get groceries. Right now at the site that we were working at, you could see 5 or 6 shacks spread out in the area. In the process of construction were 3 cinder block homes, including the one that we were working on. In the broader area, there are hundreds of people living, as we learned when we distributed bags of food on the last day, and people sort of came out of the woodwork. How people earn a living in Maranao is not clear to me. At one point during the week, Bruce asked whether there was any music. I'm not sure why he did that, but one of the families in the area produced this boombox type of thing, which was then connected to an extension cord, which then was connected to some source of electricity. And so for a couple of days while we were working there, we listened to music, which was a variety of American pop music with lots of native Nicaraguan music mixed in, most of which I'm pleased to say featured the accordion. It's always a very special time in Nicaragua. It is the time when we open the eyes of our heart, as we heard in the song earlier today. So that's Marianao in a nutshell, and I'll now turn it over to someone else. Thank you.
Now that you have a flavor of what our new community is like, I'm going to ask Bruce Megan to talk a little bit more about how the house that they built this year is different from the other houses. And he'll add a little bit more about the community and the work that we're doing there too.
Morning. The houses that we built in Carlos Fonseca over the past few years were a combination of concrete block on the lower part, and then there was some wood framing built on top of that with some very thin concrete fiberboard type stuff, kind of like masonite. Not so durable on the upper part. And then the roof was made out of corrugated sheet metal. And we were able to, our crew, along with some local contract help, were able to complete that house in less than a week, about 4 to 5 days. So now that we've moved over to this new community, they've kind of revised the design so that there is no longer any wood at all in the construction, which is really a good thing because there's a bit of a termite problem in Nicaragua. So anything that touches the ground is prime meat for for all of the bugs. So anyway, now we are building the house entirely out of concrete block with tubular steel columns in each of the corners, and all of the framing for the roof is also tubular steel, so it'll last much, much longer. Of course, there's an additional cost of which we underwrite for the materials, and then there's more labor. But the house was much more durable and will last a long time. And this community that, shall we say, is, I'll try my pronunciation, Mamaroneck. Okay.
Mamaroneck.
Okay, if you say so. But anyway, this is a great community, and it's what Paul described. It is all descendants of an original family that owned this whole big piece of land, which is, I think, something along the order of about 60 acres or so. And so, and over time, the plots of land that surround the fields have been subdivided with the successive generations of folks. One of the ways that they make a living there is that after the peanuts are harvested by machine, these folks will are entitled to go in and pick the peanuts that are left over. So they can they'll pick and fill a huge trash bag, a contractor bag, full of peanuts. And I think it's like 100 pounds of peanuts, and it takes them God knows how long. And for that, they get paid a grand sum, I think it's about $12. And that takes a couple of people more than a day to do. So income is not very plentiful there. And this is one of the reasons why we're there, is to help these folks. And it's to help them to help themselves by providing a house for them so that they can not worry so much about their shelter, but then be more concerned about finding work and providing for their families. So it's really was a refreshing look at this new community where folks are so much more in need from the previous community that we worked in. And it's been a pleasure to see over the years the original community of Carlos Fonseca improve and everybody's quality of life improve. So we're looking forward to a further relationship with whatever Kathy said. So we'll have to record a sound bite of that name. So anyway, but so we look forward to working in that community again next year, and we look forward to seeing some new faces from the congregation join us. There's so much that, so many rewards, personal rewards, for participating in that. Thank you very much.
Over the years, we've had wonderful inspiration from Kathy Sullivan and her co-partner in crime, Carol Cawley, who was a former member of our congregation here. They have wonderful things that they do. Their work is a little bit different than the really hard work that's done by Dr. Morelli and Bruce Megan and Paul Gardefee and myself. It's very joyful, and it brings smiles to everyone who participates. So I'm going to introduce Kathy so she can tell you more about the work that she and Carol have been doing for many years.
Good morning. So how lucky am I don't have to do construction work because I can't. This was my 12th year, not too shabby. This year's Bible selection, chosen by our talented and wonderful Carol Cawley, was read to the children in all the schools we visited with great feeling and animation by our translator, 19-year-old pre-kindergarten teacher, Indiana. Our story this year was Joseph and his coat of many colors. It's a story that lends itself to animation and drama, a tale of a parent's favoritism of one child over others, jealousy of the favored one by his siblings, revenge, humility, forgiveness, and redemption. The children were wide-eyed and engaged throughout. This year, we visited 7 schools and churches. At each school, we gave out story-related projects, stickers and Joseph for 1st and 2nd graders, coloring pages and crayons for the very little ones, and the task of assembling a coat of many colors out of strips of colored crepe paper for the bigger kids. For that, we employed our seamstresses, Emma and Sophie Gardefee, who brought a special sweetness and gentleness and fondness for the children and a willingness to engage them. At each place we visited, we had a bubble party for the little ones and beads for the bigger kids. Bubbles are always a big hit for kids of all ages, and the bigger kids love to make their own necklaces and bracelets. I was particularly struck by how much the boys loved making necklaces for themselves and how they formed patterns and chose their beads carefully. In addition to school activities, we brought your donations of new and gently used clothing and flip-flops and sandals to very poor people who were grateful to get them. The mission tells us where the need is greatest. We gave out clothing in 2 locations, one a community where people were relocated from a garbage dump and live in very humble circumstances. The other, a poor farming community called Mamaroneck. It was very touching for us to receive hugs of gratitude, which we accepted on your behalf from many of the children and adults we met. One afternoon, we went to a big grocery store, Polymax, maybe the Nicaraguan equivalent of our superstores, and we bought enough bread, peanut butter and jelly to make 400 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. That was our nighttime activity. We also bought rice and beans, soap and matches, oil and sugar and salt to give out to 50 families selected by the mission. In each school we visited, there were approximately 60 children. We know that because that's how many sandwiches and juice we brought, and they all disappeared. We do essentially the same thing in each place we visit. Story, projects, bubbles, beads, and sandwiches. It might sound like a grind, but how could it be? With all the joyous laughter and fun we have. By Thursday, it's time to go home. And I always think, but we just got here and I'm having fun. And then I console myself and I think about, okay, what can we do different? What can we do better? And who can we bring next year? And I hope somebody here will come. Thank you.
So we do have fun, lots of fun. And you'll have to join us afterwards to sample a variety of Nicaraguan food. Not all of it comes from Nicaragua, but one particular item does come directly from Nicaragua. But I'd like to introduce my co-leader, Amy Brilia, who will give a summary of our trip this year.
Good morning. Just as a wrap-up, I would like to say that despite we do bring a lot with us when we go to Nicaragua, not only do we bring stuff, we also bring a tremendous amount of hope to the people. This hope was described in this way, and which really touched my heart. We take a van from the Mamaroneck United Methodist Church, from our location here, and we take the van to the airport. Our van driver said, you know, first of all, the van driver was from Jamaica. The van driver said to me, even though you're bringing all this stuff, it's not the stuff. What you're doing is you're bringing hope. Now this guy, who was our van driver, understood that because he's been in these situations. He has direct experience in his life. So it was very touching to hear him say that. And just like in our song that the children sang and that we sang this morning, when we see our neighbor, we're gonna have a light, right, within us. When we see our neighbors, we lift up our hearts. Just like when Moses saw God, his face was shining, okay? When we go to Nicaragua, we bring hope to the people. And that's one of the greatest things that we bring, along with all of our other things that you've heard about. The things that we do, the materialistic things, the clothing that's so needed, the food that's so welcomed. So it's really a wonderful trip that we have. We have an awesome team. I mean awesome, okay? We do a lot. We don't stop until we drop. Until we drop, until it's 9 o'clock at night. But you know what? It's okay. It's good. It's good for us because we are able to try to help others. You know, Carol didn't have a chance to really say what she does. Carol does a lot while she's there working at the nursing home, so I'm stepping in for her. I hope she doesn't mind. She does a lot. I was a floater, so I went around to the various places. And it's just incredible the amount that we give of ourselves, which is really wonderful. I want to encourage the Boy Scouts that are here. If you have any interest, and anybody else who hasn't gone to Nicaragua before, I want to encourage you really to consider it. It's a life-changing experience. You can only learn more about yourself. You can learn about other people's by going, by participating, by being part of a larger community, of a larger space than where we are here. Okay? So thank you.
So I just want to say thank you to our team. As you can see, they all had different roles, and everybody, it was like the parts of the body that Paul talks about in the Bible, and every part working together, and each one brought special gifts of the heart and spirit and talents and the hands and the work that they did. So we really appreciate your sharing today, and let's just affirm them again with our applause. Thank you so much. And you can talk to them more during the coffee hour too if you have questions. We have some pictures on the bulletin board too that you can check out. So our faith is all about offering, first of all, offering ourselves, opening our hearts, or as we said earlier, open the eyes of my heart. And then we also offer our gifts, our time and talents. And when we join the Methodist Church, we have a membership vow of prayers, presence, gifts, and service. So that's our vow. The Boy Scouts have a lot of good oaths and law. That's our Methodist vow, to support the church by our prayers, presence, gifts, and service. So as we give for ministry, we are also blessed because we can make a difference. So at this time, we'll take up our offering, and we'll have an offering of music from Soulshine again. Thank you, Soulshine.
There's a bird in a mango tree, singing songs for you.